Hey, Paul, man. So, this is just my opinion, right? But it's like from what I've been reading and learning since I had to get into law and rights of the realm, basically just through doing petitions and realizing that the law was being completely undermined by the government to do with like political rights. And because I've been doing ancient sites and history and stuff like that as a separate thing, just ended up realizing that so when I was doing Magna Carta, there's loads of people going on about Magna Carta recently, but they don't necessarily go into other subjects. They got the confirmation of the Charters 1297, which keeps the Magna Carta, Charter of Liberties, and Charter of the Forest in effect, right? Even though the government have repealed some of it, but they're not meant to be able to. The Charter of Liberty, the confirmation of the Charters is going to keep it all in place. And there's some the open parliament with all the ancient privileges and rights ever made, but yet they've repealed some of them. So there's some questionable things going on. But the laws of Edward the Confessor, anyway. So these charters, the Charter of the Forest, Charter of Liberty, Magna Carta, retain all the ancient laws of Edward the Confessor, right? Because when William the Conqueror came over, he said that, you can, we're going to keep all of the ancient laws of Edward the Confessor, right? But the first law that was ever made was the Ancient Liberties of London that could be kept. Well, it wasn't the first law that was ever made, obviously, because there was, the laws of Edward the Confessor, right? But the first, law since the conquest was the London, right? The ancient liberties of London, which there wasn't even. That's got really nothing to do with the Celts and the pre-Roman invasion, because there wasn't really a London before then. It wasn't like the Celts didn't, do anything with that area of England, particularly until the Romans came over, put the road through and established Londinium, right? Which the word for, I think that London really is the lunar, right? The moon, the Morns, the moons, Mohans, right? London is the word, actually, Lon is connected to the moon. Now, if there wasn't really a proper town or anything at London, it was a massive river, but the Celts didn't have any kind of famous settlement or well-known settlement. There might have been villages scattered around. Why do they call it London or Londinium? Well, this is just my opinion, and this might contradict what the professionals and archaeologists might say, but Stonehenge obviously is really well known. Howard Crowhurst says that they called it the Temple of Apollo, and Apollo is meant to do with the sun, right? And obviously Stonehenge is set up for observing the sun and the sunrise, and the whole thing to do with time and the calendar, which Howard Crowhurst has also done videos about, right? So if you've got somewhere that is very prominent for the sun, which is even a temple of the sun and well known through Europe, even though no one wrote about it hardly, for the Temple of the Sun, then wouldn't it be interesting if the Romans decided to make a new town or settlement and have it to do with the moon? And then you've got where we are now, near, not far away from places like Marsden, right? They've got all those ancient customs of where they rake the river, right? They've got this celebration festival where they go and they go along the side of the river and rake it, the reflection of the moon, right? And then you've even got I think it's Lancaster, where they put all the loony bins, because what they call loonies, lunar, right? It's like the women's menstrual cycle, stress time of the year, period pains and all that, right? They got the loony bin at Lancaster, but also they've got the River Loon at Lancaster, right? So the moon, they associate it with the river, and cycles and so forth, as well as the sun. But so London has got a river, but it's also got a very prominent bend in it, like a definite kind of like proper right angle almost, right? Like a proper right angle there. I think like possibly the Romans had Londinium to sort of complement, opposite to the sun. And if Stonehenge was a prominent place, Wiltshire, Stonehenge, West Kennet, Old Sarum, all those places, it was kind of like a prehistoric, definitely a prehistoric centre, Avebury and so forth. It's a concentrated, important place of prehistoric sites in England. And, Winchester's also been the capital at times as well. Then it would be interesting if the Romans, had something opposite to the sun and had the moon, right? Although Scotland's got the recumbent stones, which the moon moves over the top of, but the Romans never got into Scotland. But it's quite interesting that if they might call it Londinium to do with the moon, when, Aberdeenshire has actually got all the stone circles for the observing the moon, as opposed to Stonehenge. So, where am I going with this? Right, so effectively, right, where I'm going with this is, so up until the conquest with William the Conqueror, right, when the first modern law that's a proper written act of law in modern terms really is the Charter of London, right? Because 1066 and just after it is way before 1100, with the Charter of Liberties, and then 1215 with Magna Carta and 1297, and then you've got like your Statutes of Westminster the First and Second, right? These are all for the modern legal system. Now, when the Romans came and kind of like upgraded or updated all the roads, because obviously like there's been a lot of videos people have been putting out there recently about the roads already sort of really kind of been there, but them just improving them or making them better, right? The Romans were doing burials, right? The Romans were doing some burials, right? And the Celts definitely did, and the prehistoric people, right? Now, this is to do with the ancient customs and traditions, right? Now, we know that they buried them to make symbolic monuments and also to preserve and protect them, right? And also to do with honour and dignity. Now, the ones that are sealed up, you're not going to go back. The way I see it is this. If there's an ancient temple or monument that's to be used, it's got a doorway, you can go in and out, even though, like, Newgrange, they kind of opened and closed it at different times. If there is no doorway, if it's completely and permanently sealed, then you're not meant to go back in. And that's why I see that, if you're buried in a mound with no entrance, completely covered in earth, the person's gone over to the other side and they're not coming back. They've left, they're leaving, right? But if you go into a temple where there's a doorway, you can go into the other world and then come back again, right? And that's my main interpretation between the difference between these monuments. You've got temples where you go in, you can go over and commune with the spirits and return, or if you're not coming back, then there is no gateway or doorway, right? And you're not meant to go back in there. Now, this is the thing, right? The Romans were over here for quite a long time where there was still, I hate that word pagan. I wish we could erase it from history and not have that word pagan, because it kind of conjures up sort of, it tends to lean towards the devil and evil and things like that, or just kind of pure nature, not necessarily intellectual, astrological, mathematical, observing or understanding anything. It's almost kind of just like, wild deer and pipers. The ironic thing is that if you look at the Jewish religion, and before Christianity, right, one of their symbols is the hand with the eye on, I think, but also it is Pan. It's actually a horn, to blow the horn. So it's funny that even before Christianity, the very early, Jews from the early Old Testament, and the stone tablets, is meant to actually be the horn. Now, that's ironic that Christianity or pre-Christianity religion their symbol for before their religion was one of them. The main ones was horn, blowing a horn. So the irony that they call our early religion in the Celts, call that Pan, when the word Pan is most definitely kind of like Herne the Hunter type symbology, almost like Gunderstrup Cauldron and, blowing horns and nature and things like that, actually is associated with pre-Christianity in their religion, not necessarily just ours. And to just blanket it with this kind of like pagan thing, I think is wrong, or Wicca or whatever. When our, the Druids and prehistoric people before the Druids were actually very much into astronomy, geography, tracking, lots of intellectual subjects, not just, the knowledge of plants and nature and so forth, right? Now, trying to come back to... So, when Christianity starts to come over here, right, while we've got the Romans here, and then eventually, towards the end of the Roman Empire, Constantine adopts it, and then you've got all this, cross, which the cross wasn't a religious thing, it was like judicial punishment, right? It ends up being a symbol of a religion, but it wasn't a religious symbol, it was actually a symbol from justice in the judicial system of the Roman Empire, which ends up becoming a symbol of a religion, right? Now, this is the thing, and I know that, like, when I describe things, it can be a little bit of a kind of like, roundabout the conversation type thing, rather than, like, it's not necessarily like bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's more a meander, right? But when these saints, right, all these different saints, particularly St. Patrick and so forth, right, are on their missions, right, Christianity, and we've got, like in Ireland, we've got these Clogteach towers popping up, right, around 800 or 900, so they say, these Clogteach towers, before the actual church becomes one building, when they've got like the congregation hall, and they've got the bell towers, and you've also got those strange buildings around the islands in Ireland, that there's kind of like little peak-pointed buildings they've got on those islands and things like that, right? Around that time, through the switch over to Christianity, through the conversion, right, when you've got all these Scottish crosses, with the, between the Pictish writing and the Scottish Celtic crosses, which are a little bit of a hybrid between kind of like the pre-Christianity and post-Christianity, right? You've got like the Book of Kells, right? It's got all these illuminations in it. And those illuminations are very, very much still entrenched in the Celtic ideology and way of thinking and understanding and study, right? Because a lot of those illuminations are intricately exhibiting the spiritual experience from the past people, but blended into Christianity, right? Now, at that point and that stage, around 700 or 800, you've got some Vikings are raiding some of the temples and tombs, because we know that they did some scrawlings on the walls, right? So the Vikings did some raiding of the religious temples and sites, but the Vikings themselves were doing burials. Now, this is what I see the turning point, and this is how I'm going to kind of insert this issue with the archaeologists, right? This sort of like issue with the archaeologists and the universities that we've currently got, right? Because Oxford University obviously had a dispute, and then that's how Cambridge came about, because they fell out, right? And then they went and did Cambridge, so they're Oxford and Cambridge, right? But Oxford University starts off as a monastery, right? It's a religious centre, religious study, right? Now, at that point, as far as I know, they're not necessarily got a keen interest in needing to or wanting to go dig everything up for science study or learning, right? Because we've still got, particularly in Ireland, right? Because remember, the furthest west coast of Ireland, right, wasn't fully conquered properly until Queen Elizabeth I, right, which is pretty much when we only just started going over to America, right? So, and there was still kind of like, they still got kind of traditions, really, for burying and burials, right, until Christianity came over. Christianity really marks the complete and total end of burying and burials in that context, rather than graves with the cross over, right? The cross over the top. Now, the thing is, in the Book of Kells, they've still got a understanding and connection. At this point, right, I need to, this is my basis, right? Burials are burials, right? Graves are graves. You don't need to study them or learn anything about them, because you know what they're for, right? You know what they're for. You know what they're about. They're there to bury someone. Rest in peace, preserve them, protect them, or whatever. And the more elaborate and ceremonial they are, then the more monumental they are, and the less discreet and private or even unknown they are, right? So you've got a spectrum of less important to more important and elaborate, right? Not to be mixed up with temples, although some temples combine both burials and religious practice. Now, the thing is, right, when you're burying someone and commemorating them, you don't need to learn anything about them, because you already know that, and you usually, it's the memorial, right? The memorial is the memory. That's the point, right? The memorial is to remember. That is the remembering. It is the record itself, right? Now, obviously, while you're doing these things, and while you're progressing through time, right, while time is, moving forward, there's nothing to study, right? Now, this is the thing. Now, unless you forget, now, the Celts didn't write things down, but instead they made the memorials, right? Itself is the memory to remember, right? Now, there's not really anything to learn about, because we are humans, and this is the thing. Now, obviously, from, the ancient Greeks and the Romans were writing things down, way before the Roman conquest, and much further back. So, if you're in ancient Greece, why do you need to, if you've been writing things down literally, since as far back as you can go, why do you need to dig anything up if you've already written about it? Now, I read a story about the founding of Rome. I don't know if it was the founder of Rome or the second founder, but at one point he buried something or had some writing or some scripts or texts, and then I think it was the next ruler or the ruler after that it ended up becoming uncovered or something, and they found them, and then the elders of the city read them, and they actually thought they were a load of rubbish and then destroyed or burned them so no one could read it, right? Now, regardless of whether they valued them or not, they just destroyed them anyway. They didn't actually want people to read them because it wasn't something that they wanted them to read or know about, and they just destroyed them or said they were insignificant. But they had it written down. So it was the actual thing that was buried, which actually had the information written on it, which actually told them. Now, whether they agreed with it or not, it was there actually in writing. They didn't have to piece it together. They didn't have to find, bits of finger bones and brittle. Now, if you can't dig something up that's actually in writing itself, and if you're not satisfied with that, then what's going to satisfy you? It's like Time Team discover actually, this is just like an example, right? This is fictional, this bit, but this is just like an example, right? Time Team discover ancient Celtic text in writing that actually writes, 7 or 8 texts, right? So they don't need to find bits and bats or flints or bits and bobs and try and piece it all together, work it all out with the rest of the stuff they found, right? It just tells them in writing, written, right? But just imagine, right? Time Team find 7 ancient Celtic texts. They did actually write something, but head archaeologist deems it unimportant or questionable, or he doesn't like what he says, so he burns them and destroys them. So they don't actually want you to know about anything or learn anything, right? Now, that's actually what happened in the founding of Rome, right? I was reading a few months ago, and this was like, a generation or two after, from the founding of Rome. So they had writing and informations which they actually found, and that was the thing that was buried, but they didn't like it and they didn't want people to know about it, so they burned it or destroyed it, right? Now, isn't that ironic, right? So they actually didn't want to learn about the history and past, and they didn't actually want to preserve or save anything, right? Now, the thing is that if, now, right, let's say, I like using Jimmy Savile as an example, right? Jimmy Savile, right? We bury him. No one needs to dig him up because no one needs to know anything about him. No one wants to know anything about him, and anything that is, we've got recordings of him, on TV. People have written books about him. The BBC have even done a comedy about him. There's nothing to need to know or learn, right? So why would you need to go dig him up? Now, even when he was alive, there's still things that people don't know absolutely certain for sure. It's all speculation, right? But the fact is that when someone dies, right, you bury them, and that's it. It's ceremonial. Now, you've got information. You don't need to go there anymore. This is the thing. Now, going through history with people, right? All generations have passed information over to the next generation anyway, and we've got writing going back in history. What really is there to learn? And are these archaeologists really learning anything that we don't already know, or that we don't already understand, or we can't already guess? Really, right? Is another one more flint head, or one more arrowhead, or one more, carved, widget bone, or whatever? Are they really putting a jigsaw puzzle together and solving something, or is the truth of it really that they're just collecting stuff for their own benefit and use? It's their little collection, they're actually just collecting things, right? And they say that it's to learn, and they claim that it's for more knowledge, and they claim that it's for in the name of education, but are they just collecting their own little museum, collection for themselves, and I done well, right? Really, when you look at it, did they really add that much more information, right? And, could they have just found it, catalogued it, photographed it, and then put it back again? Now, the thing is, right, this is the thing. A lot of those people have got famous and got written into books themselves, got awards and photographs, honours and accolades on the back of other people's burials, remains, peace, memorials, and their awards that they were clinging to, that they were giving themselves in the earth, but someone else comes, digs it up, and then the professor is like, oh, look, I found an ancient award, from, the Fifth Ming Dynasty. Aren't I clever? Now you can give me an award because I found some Ming Emperor's award. This is the thing. What they're actually doing is digging up other people's awards, and then they're getting an award for it, right? And it's in a little collection. It's almost kind of like on the Predator when he's, in his spaceship and he's like dusting off all those weird alien bones that he's beaten and collected, right? This is the thing, right? Now, this is why I don't like these archaeologists, because you've got all these laws that protect certain things, right? But if you're an academical institution, if you're an archaeologist, if you've got a PhD, if you're a professor, you've got the privilege, all these academic and university privileges of being able to, dig up, interfere with, take things that, firstly, don't belong to them, purely on the basis that they're privileged, they've got a right to where no one else can. They can get special permissions and apply for special permissions, and they know they're more clever than anyone else, and they're the ones who will make more use out of it for everyone else, or it can be in their own display and collection when they'll be getting the awards and honours for doing it, right? Yeah, they don't own any of it. They don't own, it's not theirs to take, right? And this is the thing, in law, if you prove that something is yours, then it's yours, like you've inherited it. Although then we've got, when the royals come into the equation, when certain treasures that found went to the royals, right? Now, this is the thing, right? And when you learn about the law of wheel reef, right, this is what the actual real law is, not the rubbish, tosh, bullshit law, right, that they're trying to pass us off with, right? Which they've done that with those other rights, like, right to petition and fleeced us off, right? And they're doing it with the other rights as well. The wheel reef law is that you do not disrupt, move, or interfere with deceased or buried persons. They're left to rest in peace. And then the more prestigious they are, the more elaborate the memorial, right? And so forth. But these people, this is their business, is messing with these things, right? But they're not theirs. And this is a thing, when you, your testicles and your eyeballs and your hair or whatever disintegrate, there's nothing left but the bone, right? And these objects and items were meant to be the identity of the person, all that's left of who or what they were, right? And that's why, they're buried with their identity. And what these people are doing coming along is taking their identity from them. They're stealing, and not only that, they're actually themselves getting awards out of it and becoming famous from it. You know what it's like? I watched a video the other day, a really good video on YouTube, to do with Queen Elizabeth's pirates, like... Sir Francis Drake and his relative, what do you call him? Not Duke of Buckingham. Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh, right? Sir Walter Raleigh and Sir Francis Drake. This video actually painted them as, framed them, as Queen Elizabeth pirates, because they went and did a lot of plundering and robbing and stuff to do with the, Spanish and French and so forth, and connected to, going over to the Americas and that, right? Are the archaeologists really, the Queen's pirates or the King's pirates really, and are they just tearing things up and destroying them? Are the archaeologists really, the royals' pirates? Now, why I say that is this, right? At one point, burials are burials and a memorial's a memorial, right? It's there, it speaks for itself, that there's no need to poke around and digging it, for the same reason that, why go poke around the Jimmy Savile's grave? What do you need from it, right? There's no interest. You go there to... The memorial's there so you can go and remember, right? By praying or thinking, right? Or just to interpret it. There's an interpretation there. You don't have to go rob it, plunder it, and treasure trove it. Now, the interesting thing is that after, and let's not forget that, these people, Howard Crowhurst has, proved that they were highly advanced in mathematics, astronomy, all these sciences way before the ancient Greeks, right? And so, to what extent the first early Oxford University, right, was doing all of the sciences, the whole of the sciences, right, and how much was Christianity, right? But Christianity had been burying people as well, burying people in graves, and they put the crosses there, and they're actually at and around the places of worship, the temples, the churches, right? Obviously, like in Ireland, those clog teachers, it was like a separate bell tower, and then the congregational hall, and then they gradually like merge into one thing, right? Now, this is the thing. At what point, therefore, if you've got like a crossover between, pagan, and let's not forget the Romans are pagan, and then Christianity, burials are burials. Now, they had different religions at the same time. There was Christianity at the same time as the ancient Greek gods, and at the same time as the ancient Celtic gods, and even Hindu, right, and Jews, right, whatever. Now, if they exist at the same time, right, you don't need to go poking around in other people's burials and ripping them up, right? Because it's the burials, that's what they're there for, memorials, right? At what point do people want to start poking around and digging them up, right? Now, this is the thing, and this is what I've learned from reading, and I have done a few talks about this before, right, but not like an updated version of it, right? This is the thing. From the William the Conqueror Charter, at least, they start throwing into the charters for the cities these laws for treasure trove, right? Which is that if you find any treasure within the liberty of the city, right, you can keep it, right? But you wouldn't have been able to do that under the Wheel Reef Law, which was meant to be for the whole country, right? Because those things belong to those buried persons, and you're not allowed to dig them up, right? So, treasure trove, this is the thing. And it just seems to me, and I have said this in another video, but I'm going to set it out again now, that when I read those charters and the provisions of them, they've got the language they end up starting to use by the time they get to 1100 and 1200 and 1300 is that they're very encouraging, and the law of people in the cities in London have a legal advantage over people out of the city. There seems to be a kind of like Oliver Twist, when Dickens wrote Oliver Twist and the whole Fagin and all the crowns and treasures and gold that Fagin's got, and then he's got all these robbers going out. There used to be a book, there's a book called by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone called The City of Thieves, right? Port Blacksand, The City of Thieves, right? And it's all the law for London, that Londoners can go out and about around the whole country. They don't have to pay tolls. They can go through tolls without paying. They've got a legal advantage over other people if anyone challenges them in the city and so forth. And then and then all this language to do with, we'll have maces of gold and silver. The liberty of the city will have sergeants, and where they're getting all this gold from. Where they're getting all these maces of gold and silver from. And the language to do with naturally born people, Denzians and aliens and naturalization and all this, I get that there's a flavour in those charters of smooth talk, the monarchs smooth talking over people to kind of make it sound like, everyone's, proud of the ancestry, or we're supporting the ancestry, even though, William the Conqueror won't from here, right? But then they seem to be incorrigible to this treasure trove thing and wanting gold and silver. Now, where the fuck are they going to get it all from? Well, you're only going to get it from if you find it buried, which to me has the air of raiding about it, the air of looting and raiding. Now, Ireland has got the most preserved ancient monuments because Ireland was the least kind of like pillaged and plundered. Now, in this modern time, there's a lot of teenagers in Ireland who get into alcohol, drinking, cannabis, etc., 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 and you get a lot of graffiti in those places, right? But without the modern kind of like deviation from these kind of like, sort of DOSA kind of habits, right? They're the least kind of like they're the most preserved and the least disrupted out of the whole islands, right? Because they've had the less. But then you got in the 1800s, you got all those people who were going out with dynamite and blowing them up, and opening tombs and so forth, right? But to me, from reading the history now and the law, it seems like there was an incorrigible flavour to it. And then you see, if you're invaded and if you've taken over, the last thing you want is anybody to be able to prove ownership or right over land or heritage, right? Now, if the remains in these places are destroyed, then you've got less chance of doing that, right? So there's that undertone to it as well as like nicking all the gold. Now, I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not, King Charles wasn't around then, right? He's only one generation. He himself did not, do, this or that, or, he's not William the Conqueror himself, is he, right? I'm not saying that King Charles is or represents William the Conqueror. What I'm saying is that from what I read, and what the language is in these things, it seems as that flavour. Now, if Oxford and Cambridge are meant to be religious institutes and monasteries, then they know what burials are and they know what they're there for. And also, the Tomb of Rochester is actually the Tomb of Rochester. It is in the Laws of Edward the Confessor as an ancient tomb, proper Christian tomb, and it says that you don't dig bodies up. And now it's not meant to be for any religion, right? So the Tomb of Rochester, if anything, is pro-conservationalist of the ancient sites, even being Christian, right? It's not saying go dig them up. But the charters after the conquest are bordering on provocative and suggestive language that you should go dig it all up and nick it all, right? Not blatantly, but it has definitely got that prominent flavour to it, right? So how did we get to this point when all the archaeologists and universities are having a field day and they love digging it up and nicking everything, right? And putting in their university and getting the awards themselves. This is the thing, when actually a lot of it is illegal, whether they like it or not. This is the thing. It is illegal, and this is the thing, right? What gives them the legal right in law to do it? What gives them the right in law? Oh, I'm clever. I've got a degree, right? If you're clever and you've got a degree, can you go around the machine gun and shoot everyone? No, right? It's illegal. What gives them the right? Oh, I'm clever. I've got a PhD. So therefore I can do it. And I should be able to do it. And the local council should grant permission and vote me to do it, or, National Trust should, or the Secretary of State for Transport should, just because I'm Professor Dingle, right? That is the only basis. Or I'm going to further education. But what education are they furthering by it? And actually, later on, they might make some discoveries, but are they just... they're not actually... The thing with history, right? The thing with archaeology and history, right, is that you're only remembering something that we already knew before, right? We already did know something, we've already done something, and we already knew absolutely everything about it fully, and then, we made a memorial and memory for it, right? They're not furthering the understanding of molecular energy dynamics, or making some fucking vortex into another universe, or like powering the planet off a marble or whatever, right? In science, these things were not only already known, commonplace and normal knowledge to existing past human beings, right? It's not like, we've never ever, moved planet Mars, ourselves, of course, using, fucking Elon Musk's new laser pen or something, right? It isn't actually a new discovery. It is only remembering something which we already knew, but not only that we already knew it, it was normal and mundane, right? Or even common knowledge. And the memorial itself, if you can read and understand it, it is meant to be the knowledge, like on the Maya glyphs and things like that. I mean, if you got a Maya person from back then, you can still read it all off on there, and it's all there, right? But this is the thing, that whether that story from the founding of Rome's true or not, the first founder of Rome, buried, some scriptures or whatever, and then later on they got unearthed, in a natural earthquake or whatever it was. Something happened with one of the monuments, and it kind of like, the old documents came out, and they actually deemed that they were a lot of tosh, right? So that's just an example. Even around the time of Christ, or, before that, the founding of Rome, even then, they buried things, and then they were kept, when they actually ended up unearthing them, they didn't want them. They didn't want to know what it was, and they didn't want the information, and they thought it was a lot of tosh, and actually destroyed it. They didn't want anyone to know it, right? So that's just an example. So even when it's written, what I'm trying to say is, right, even when it is written in, black and white, in letters, actually someone's, it's not a clue, it's not, they haven't found a clue, right, or a jigsaw puzzle piece. It actually is, fully written and complete for them, there it is, right? Even, before Christ, they didn't want it, they didn't want to know what it was, right? And the thing with the government now is, they're full on, Department of Culture and, Department of Innovation and Technology. They want satellites, they want GPS tracking, they want adverts on TV that tell you to buy a microchip to track your dog, right? So we know where it is all the time, right? They want smartphones, 007 gadget watches. They're not really... The government, to be honest, I don't think the government really are that bothered or interested about history. I don't think. But the archaeologists are, because they like it and love it. But the people who like it and love it, or claim they do, are the ones who are destroying it through their joy of it. It's like liking cakes and buns, right? You can love cakes and buns and cookings, but if you look at most women on TV who are cooking and baking, they're messing their body. They're even self-harming, right? All these people who love cooking and icing cake and, cooking and they're the ones who are fucking themselves up more than anyone else, right? They're even they're messing themselves up for the love of their, vocation, which is eating, right? And that is what these archaeologists are doing. And they can't stop themselves. They can't stop poking around. And the thing is that they've even come up with a motto, like, archaeology is destructive by nature, right? Oh, what a shame. It's like saying, what a shame. Baking cakes and tasting them and eating them is destructive to my body. It's like that. It's like saying, oh, what a shame. I'm a chef. I've just got a degree in cooking. Now I'm going to make some bonbons. Oh, what a shame. Eating bonbons is, he's going to send me diabetic. It's destructive, but what a shame, you got to go die doing something you love, right? And this is the thing with the archaeologists. They're massacring everything. But the thing is with the legal side of it, right, it isn't theirs to take. It's not theirs. And the ancient laws of William the Confessor includes wheel reef, which actually protects monuments and burials, right? And people's items. They belong to those people, right? And people, the slow corruption, archaeology has absorbed part of this treasure trove culture, which has been introduced by the conquering elite, right? And it's somehow got into the religious institutes, which at the time of the Tomb of Rochester were actually still actively protecting the ancient sites, right? And burials. We know what they are, right? And they didn't need to dig up, Queen whatever, in Ireland's burial. This is the thing, right? It's a buried person there. Oh, but we don't know anything about them. Now we need to know everything about them, and then, is that the only reason? And I can have it all in my little collection in a museum. And even though half of the stuff from the museum's got nicked and gone missing, apparently, right? A lot of these things get stolen and nicked. We don't know who's doing that. Is that part of the charter and treasure trove? They've been, is it arranged that they go missing because they don't want us to know and learn about them? This is a question, right? It snuck in, and it's not, I don't believe that anyone really is doing it for the good of mankind if they even want to accept an award or qualification. If you're doing something for the good of mankind, right, you wouldn't accept any award or qualification, right, unless you needed it in the first place to be able to do it. But this is the thing, these people, with their Brit Awards and their clapping and applauses and their, there's nothing worse than opening a book, right? Like from a university PhD, and in the first page it was like, oh, and I dedicate this book to my professor. I know he'll know that I love him to pieces. I know that my professor, he'll be so, all the times that we had in the university, he knows that there's no need for me to even say that I appreciate every second and minute of his, library that was fully funded, and, they roll out the rigmarole, right? All this, this Oxford peerage private school, well, it is the peerage, isn't it? It's like they're in a peerage, Well, this I could not thank this professor enough. If it wasn't for him and his support, the support that he gave me throughout my, degree, if it wasn't for the support of my professor, he doesn't, I don't even have to mention it. He knows that he knows how much I appreciate it, that I don't even have to mention it. But I will anyway, and I'll write 50 pages about it before I get into the fucking book, right? Professor and me sat in a tree, KSSING, right? We'll write a romance novel, me and the professor, right? 250 pages, and then, no need to mention that, but I will anyway, and now here's the book, right? It makes you sick, and maybe I'm born into the wrong peerage, maybe I'm born through the wrong family, maybe I've had the wrong upbringing, and maybe I was bullshitted at middle school about Luddites and told that they were backward, retarded, opposed to technology and machines, when actually the truth is they were using the right to petition. It's a legal right in law, and they were getting very angry with all these factory owners making a hell of a lot of money out of them all, and then losing their jobs and skills. And, the government refused to raise the minimum wage despite of, 130,000 people signing the petition, and they lost. And then they removed them all from the magistrates' courts, so we couldn't even get a fair trial anymore when we try and sue these factory owners. And, we've lost. They whooped us, they beat us, and, now even in the modern day, they're trying to make out we don't have any rights. This is the thing. All we've done is, make things and become greedy and corrupted and want more, right? This is the thing. So, I do not sympathise with archaeologists, and, it's sad when they claim to like the same things as you. It's sad when they claim to enjoy the same places and interests, but they like to dig them up, steal them and nick them for themselves and get an award for it. And then when they go to the ancient site, then, they're the one with the, I'm Professor Ditch or whatever. This is the thing. I'm Professor Ditch, you're not, right? This is the thing. And I think that's the thing, it's all about, I'm Professor Ditch, you're not, and I've got all the goodies in my museum that I've collected. You can come see them if you want, and I'll tell you all about them, right? But are they yours? Did you steal them? Are you really Professor Nick, Hello, everybody, I'm Dr. Nick, I'm Professor Nick. I nicked all these things, right? This is the thing, just a minute, that's from my ancestors, that, where'd you get that from? Oh, no, don't worry about this, I'll tell you all about this. I'll tell you all about it, and I'll tell you where it's from. I'll tell you all about it. Oh, will you really, Professor? That's funny, because I found my old grandma's notepad, and it sees that she tells me all about it in writing. Oh, no, don't worry about that old notepad. That's just, we don't want to read that. It was like the old scrolls that were dug up in Rome, we'll just have to burn those and get rid of them. We don't want to be reading that. Oh, really, Professor? It says in there that these are mine, not yours, right? And actually, you're wrong about that, and wrong about that. This is the thing with these professors, sir. This is why I am opposed to them, because, all they do is, write into a council, a couple of councillors elected who don't actually know really much at all or anything about the subject, and they just write a lot of tosh, get a thing stamped, and then you dig it all up, and then nick it all, Oh, in the name of education. But I don't think it is in the name of education. I think that they're going out to, get advantage out of things that aren't theirs, if they want to enjoy it, they can walk around with everyone else, like, and go on the tour bus. They don't need to, put it in the collection. It seems to me that, it's illegal, From what I've read in the law, a lot of it is illegal, and I think they should be prosecuted, I think they should be prosecuted because some of those things don't belong to them. And that's just what the law is, right? And if you can prove, and obviously, when they get rid of the evidence, how can you prove that it's, who so-and-so's? Well, I would, Professor, but you've even got the person. They've even nicked his ancestors. This is the thing. Not only have they nicked the objects, right, but then they go nick the ancestors and take them into bits. And who's going to do the testing to see if it is your ancestor? Oh, I'll do that for you. Oh, will you, Professor, as well? No, this is clearly not your ancestor. It's got nothing to do with you. So therefore, obviously, I'm the only person who invented DNA testing. Oh, well, Professor, it seems like you've got all the cards in your hand now, and I'll even tell you who you are and what you are when I've finished doing my biology and psychology tests on you, This is the thing with these professors, and they got everything, they've even got our ancestors, and they've even got the test to prove that they're our ancestors. They're even holding the magic for that, right? So I've actually had enough of these professors, right? And we need to modernise that wheel reef law, because it's not being enforced, and they think they can just, they think they can do whatever they want just because they write a bit of paper out and they put a stamp on it, and it's got a couple of layers next to it, and they can do what they absolute, hell they want with all these sites. So I'm opposed to them on the fact that who do they think they are? Who do they think they are? And that's my dispute. That is my dispute, basically. And I think that through the course of history, they've got greedy, and it's perverted the course. These are meant to be memorials and burials. And to be honest, if they'd have been kept in good condition and upkept, then you'd be able to go there and appreciate them and go there and, pray or remember. I mean, they're even banning praying now. Even the Christian religion's suffering now. You can't even pray in certain places, So even the Christian religion is going to be gone soon. All these religions get stamped out in the name of whatever. There's the latest, the latest technology or whatever.